All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We're going to get right into it here. As I'm sure you're all aware, the United States and Israel launched a joint operation on Saturday morning this weekend against Iran. Massive strikes all across the Iranian major cities, including Tehran, their capital. The Ayatollah Khamenei was killed by the Israeli airstrikes just on Saturday. And this is just absolutely wild. It's going to have massive implications. And we are now in a war with Iran, which is just unbelievable. And we're going to get into all of this today. We're going to talk about all the details of the attack yesterday. We're going to talk about some events that have happened since. And we're just going to speculate where this might be going, because this is just an unbelievably historic event. And for so many reasons that we'll get into, it's just unbelievably disturbing and upsetting. So we'll talk about all this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Maybe we should improve the liberty of our own country before we seek to do so abroad. Some of us have paid attention to the fact that the expert class, including the foreign policy experts, lie all the time. The correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you support our content here on YouTube, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe down below. It helps us continue the coverage of all the crazy events around the world, so I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify and giving all of those a follow, I'd also really appreciate that. But let's get into the news here. We got a lot to cover. As I said in the intro, the United States and Israel launched a joint operation in the early hours of Saturday, attacking Iran, bombing the capital, Tehran, as well as other major cities in the country. And we'll get into the details of this in a second, but they also were able to kill the Ayatollah Khamenei, as well as much of Iran's top political leaders. So we'll get into it here. I'm going to start off by showing you Donald Trump's statement, which were, again, released in the early hours Saturday morning, basically announcing on Twitter that we were at war. We don't, in this country, the politicians feel no need to go through the congressional authorization process of a war. They feel no need to follow the procedures that the founders set in place for declaring war. They are above that, they feel. So they just announced it on Twitter that we are at war with Iran, again, with no justification that is coherent. But take a look at what Trump had to say on Saturday morning. Take a look.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass.
So, of course, as the theme has been over the past couple days and couple weeks, the justification is incoherent and just non-existent, really. This is antiwar.com. This was what they put up literally hours after the strikes began. This is Kyle Anzalone at antiwar.com. It says, quote, "The United States and Israel have launched an aggressive war against Iran, and Tehran has retaliated with strikes against Israel and American military bases in the Middle East." In a video posted to Truth Social early Saturday morning, President Donald Trump announced the beginning of military operations against Iran. President Trump called on the Iranian people to rise up and seize power from their government. The president also stated that the war may result in American soldiers being killed. Spoiler alert, it has. An Israeli official said that the goal of the war is regime change in Tehran. Quote, "The goal is to create all the conditions for the overthrow of the Iranian regime. We are targeting all of Iran's political and military leadership, past, present, and future." They continued, quote, "The developments also depend on the question of how much the Iranian people will rise up." The Department of War dubbed the attack on Iran Operation Epic Fury. So for starters there, Operation Epic Fury, I mean, that's the name of this thing, so that shows how serious Pete Hegseth takes this all. And number two, we have both now officially on the record, the Israelis and the Americans officially stating that the goal here is regime change. That is on the record now. We have crossed that Rubicon, and we are now in a regime change war in Iran. That's what has been stated by both of these countries. We'll get into the history in a bit because it's crucial to understand why this is happening. Israel has always wanted regime change, and this is the first time that we've explicitly seen the United States say regime change in Iran is the goal. This is the first time we're seeing Donald Trump really seriously say that regime change is the goal in terms of our relations with Iran. He's always, well, again, we'll get into it in a bit, he's always made it very clear that a regime change was not the goal. And he has literally always made that clear. We'll get into the clips. He said this repeatedly, time and time again, all throughout his time in politics. He said this repeatedly. There's no denying that he's always had that position. So this is just utterly insane. And we have this idea, much like Operation Iraqi Freedom, this really ridiculous idea that the Iranian people, aka 92 million people of all different religious and ethnic sects, are going to rise up as one we're supposed to expect amidst all this chaos, bombs flying, potential civil war conflict in the streets of Iran, mass protests, mass riots, the government officials being assassinated left and right, the political class in turmoil. We're supposed to expect that the Iranian people, amidst all this insanity, are going to rise up as one people. All 92 million of them are going to all together communicate and rise up and form a new Jeffersonian republic in Iran. This is what we're made to believe by Lindsey Graham, who is propping up the Shah Reza Pahlavi, his son, as the heir apparent of the Iranian throne. We're seriously led to believe this. And this is what Trump said in the end of this speech. But when he mentions the Iranian people, he's talking to 92 million people of all different religious and ethnic sects. And there's just no world where the most likely scenario is that these people are all going to rise up together and create some sort of 1776 moment in Iran and form some sort of new republic with democratic processes. There's just no way. So it's hard to believe this is seriously the plan here, given how repeatedly Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance, these people who are making these decisions, they've repeatedly said for decades, all of them combined, that this is a ridiculous idea. Regime change in Iran would be a ridiculous idea. They've all said this. And suddenly, here we are, February 2026, after all of them have made their careers in large part on being against regime change wars, specifically in the Middle East because of its track record. They all now are going to turn around when it's convenient and pretend like they never held those positions. They're going to pretend like they never were against these wars. And they're going to call everyone crazy who is skeptical. They're going to call everyone who's skeptical of this or against this un-American, which was what we've seen, which is the usual playbook for war propaganda, is to call anyone who's against it anti-American or against the troops. Of course, when in reality, they are the most pro-American because they understand we who are against this understand how much damage these wars have done to this country. But we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll get more into that. We're going to stick here to the news for a second, just go over what actually happened here. And this is an article from the Associated Press. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who led the Islamic Republic since 1989, is dead at 86. Khamenei has been killed from Iran or from Israeli airstrikes. This is the Associated Press. This is John Gambrill. He says, quote, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who assembled theocratic power in Iran over the decades as its top leader and sought to turn it into a regional powerhouse, bringing it into confrontation with Israel and the United States over its nuclear program while crushing democratic protests, has been killed in U.S. and Israeli strikes. He was 86. Iranian state media reported the death early Sunday after a major attack launched by Israel and the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump said hours earlier that Khamenei had been killed in the joint operation. Khamenei dramatically remolded the Islamic Republic since he took the reins after the death of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini in 1989. Khomeini was a fiery, charismatic ideologue who led the overthrow of the Shah and installed rule by Shiite Muslim clerics tasked with spreading religious purity. It fell to Khomeini, a stodgy figure with weaker religious credentials and a leaden demeanor, to turn that revolutionary vision into a state establishment. So, in really the biggest development so far, yes, the Ayatollah Khamenei has been killed by these Israeli and American airstrikes, and this is obviously going to have massive implications for probably decades to come here in the region. Not only was he, of course, the leader, the theocrat of Iran, leading the 92 million people, and really was the sole decision maker. All negotiations had to go through him. All decisions in the country had to go through him. He was really the sole decision maker. Not only did he rule Iran, he's also in Shia Islam. He is really the leader of the religion, one of the leaders of the religion, a religious figure in Shia Islam. So this has predictably caused chaos in the region. We've seen massive unrest because of this. We see massive protests all around the Muslim world and the broader world against this because as a religious figure, he inspires religious emotions from these people. So this is really concerning now because this has caused a lot of potentially unforeseen consequences for a long time. And we saw we had just had last night, a shooting in Austin, Texas, that may have potentially, they're saying there are potential signs of terrorism, potentially inspired by what we just saw this weekend. The shooter was wearing a hoodie that said "Property of Allah." The shooter had a Iranian flag shirt, I believe the reports said, underneath that sweatshirt, and he had a Quran in his car. So there's a lot of potential here for chaos that nobody likes to consider. It's called blowback. The CIA made up the term. It's called blowback. This has been seen repeatedly. It's acts of terrorism against the countries that are acting in these ways in the Middle East. We saw 9/11 was blowback for what we were doing in the Middle East over the decades prior, the support for Israel, the bases in their Holy Land. This is stuff you have to take into consideration when we're doing military operations. The fact that the people of these countries have their own religious views that could clash with what we want to do in the region, and that is something that has to be considered. Does the risk of a backlash from this outweigh the benefits, potential benefits from these operations? That has to be considered if we're going to be sane about this. So that is what we saw on Saturday. The Iranian leader is dead. They have put in a new Ayatollah after having a kind of board of people running the country for about a day in between his death. And here is what I'm talking about, some of this craziness that we've been seeing in response to this. Local protesters are now, from this video, rioters in Pakistan trying to storm the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan. Take a look. Again, since this is a religious figure that we just killed in Iran, this is going to have reverberations not only in the country, but in the region, which a lot of people in the region, not even in Iran, looked up to him as a religious leader. It's also going to have reverberations around the world with potential blowback terrorism, which is real. The CIA made the term blowback to describe terrorism that is a response of U.S. militarism overseas, and that generates hatred for the United States. This is a real thing that needs to be considered when we're doing this. What is the potential risks of taking these actions, and does it outweigh the potential costs to the American people? Here's another example of this in Iraq. Major clashes in between pro-Iran crowds in Iraq near the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. Take a look. Now, of course, the United States and Israel attacked the major cities of Iran here, and I'm going to show you guys some videos of this because it's really crazy footage. Just this morning, Israel launched another round of these attacks, and it looks like they just basically carpet bombed the city. Like, it's actually insane. The United States was supposedly at the start of the war. Israel was focused on government buildings predominantly, and the United States was focused predominantly on the military facilities and assets in the country. That also, apparently, according to the reporting, involved a girls' school, which there are now reportedly 100 casualties from this girls' school from either American or Israeli strike on the school. So not just military and government buildings were struck. It was also civilian infrastructure, seemingly, according to the reports. But here are some of the videos from the Israeli strikes this morning on the capital city of Tehran. At least they seem to be the Israeli strikes. It's hard to tell what's American and what's Israeli at this point, but these are reportedly Israeli strikes on Tehran. Take a look. This is where Iran's retaliation really comes into play here, which is, it's interesting to see what their strategy is here, because as we said before, America and Israel announced both openly that the goal here is regime change. It's to wipe out the entire Iranian regime, all of the government officials, all of the military officials, wipe them all out. Given that, the Iranians seem to be behaving here as if they're giving everything that they've got. They are launching at all of the U.S. bases in the region, essentially. They've hit a bunch of them. And they are also launching at a bunch of these other countries as well. And they seem to just be launching at civilian infrastructure is what it seems like. We've seen in Dubai a number of hotels be struck. We've also seen, of course, retaliatory strikes on Israel in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Here's some footage from just moments before I started recording this a couple hours ago. This is footage from Jerusalem. Take a look.
Oh my God. Whoa! Holy shit! Oh my God! Yo!
Now, based on a lot of the reporting, it seems as if Israel's been getting hit pretty hard by the Iranian retaliatory strikes. And it seems like there have been a number of Israeli civilian casualties. Obviously, the Israelis are rushing between the bomb shelters and regular buildings because there are waves and waves of emergency warnings and calls to get into the shelters. So it's really chaos there at the moment. And it is also, of course, chaos around the region. Now, in one of the more troubling updates is that as of this morning, 3 Americans were killed in these strikes. And this is it's really enraging. And I'll just read here from the CENTCOM tweet, which updated everybody. It says, quote, as of 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, March 1st, 3 U.S. service members have been killed in action and 5 are seriously wounded as part of Operation Epic Fury. Several others sustained minor shrapnel injuries and concussions and are in the process of being returned to duty. Major combat operations continue and our response effort is ongoing. So they were telling the families, of course, so they did not specify where and how these people got killed. Based on, I believe, NBC News reported on this, seems like unofficial reports say they were in Kuwait and were hit by Iranian missile strikes. And again, we'll get into it in a second. This is just disgraceful that we are actually sending American troops to fight and die for Israel's regional dominance. It's just the most disgraceful thing. One of the most disgraceful things I've really ever seen from the U.S. government. And the U.S. government has engaged in a lot of disgraceful things against our own people. So that's saying a lot. Here is Donald Trump's response to this. This was what he had to say today. He just put out another statement again, like an hour ago, in response, kind of giving everyone updates. And he responded to the death of these three service members. Take a look.
Earlier today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible where that won't be the case. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help.
So in that clip I just showed you, we have both the statement that there will likely be more U.S. civilian casualties on behalf of Israel, because let's just be real. Again, we'll get into the history here. This war is entirely the entire point of this war. The objective of this war is to create chaos in Iran, to see the regime in Iran crumble, so that Israel can achieve regional dominance and hegemony in the Middle East. That is what this is for. Don't let anyone lie to you. Have some self-respect. This is not a war about democracy in the Middle East. This is not a war about bringing the Iranians freedom. And we know that because the United States does not want democracy in any country where there is anti-American sentiment, which there is a lot of in Iran. Why in the world, think about it for 2 seconds, why in the world would the United States want to bring democracy and let the people have a voice in the Middle East where large swaths of the population of Iran are not pro-America? Does that make any sense to you? Of course it doesn't. They don't want democracy in the Middle East. That's never been the goal of any of these Middle East operations. And all of us who have looked into this are aware of this. This is nothing new. But we have to just reiterate the obvious here, because this is seriously the line that they're going with. It's unbelievable they're going with it because of how thoroughly it's been debunked over the years and how they've lost the debate of public opinion on this. No serious person in real life believes that this is for democracy. But they have to tell themselves that to try and deflect from the obvious here, which is that they are supporting mass murder on behalf of a foreign country, which is what they are actually doing. It's treasonous. Well, also, at the end there, he says that he's kept his promise to Iran. At least he's kept a promise. He says that he's kept his promise to the Iranian people that they are going to have an opportunity here, a generational opportunity to take over their institutions and take over their government. Again, I'll go back to what I just said at the beginning of this episode. Who exactly are we talking to here? The Iranian people, aka the 92 million people of all different religious sects and all different ethnic groups. That's who we're expecting to all unite as one, as their government crumbles around them. Is that seriously what we believe? Because if that's really the message here from the people launching this war, then there is truly no plan, which they admit, by the way. They happily admit they have no plan. We saw Lindsey Graham today on the morning shows saying, how many times do I have to tell you? We don't have a plan. We don't need a plan. Okay, so we're going into a war with no plan, openly acknowledging and even bragging that we have no plan. Because we can destroy the country, we can tear down the government of a country, create chaos, create a civil conflict in the country, and then we can just leave, watch it explode, because that's the humanitarian thing to do. You can't say both of those things at once. Say one or the other. Say we're doing this for democracy and look like an idiot while you say it. Or acknowledge the obvious and say that the point of this is to create chaos and we're just going to step away and watch the fire burn so that Israel can expand their borders and expand their dominance in the region without any threat from Iran. Because that's what it's really for. At least be honest about it. Don't be like Lindsey Graham and play both sides of this and say that they're doing this for democracy, but we also want absolute chaos in the region, and because we don't have a plan, we're not here to create stability. So you can't do both of these things. Now, in mainstream media the past couple days, we've witnessed the now routine dereliction of duty by these networks that supposedly speak for the people. When, of course, we all know the reality is they're just state propaganda. We've seen Fox News just pumping out endless slop on behalf of the regime and on behalf of the war party. Recurring cycle of guests, Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, these like complete shills for the military-industrial complex. You also have CNN and MSNBC, who are supposedly the left-leaning alternatives in the mainstream media. These are the people that are supposedly supposed to be against this war, but the only reason they're actually against it, we all know the truth, is that Trump is doing it. If Kamala Harris was engaged in this, they'd be just as much for it, because they were very much for Ukraine funding when it was Joe Biden doing it. And this is what we know the game here. It's a fake political fight that they feel obligated to play. So the spectrum on mainstream media goes kind of against it to complete for it. Let's just send Americans to die in this war. That's the spectrum on mainstream media. And given that that's the spectrum, no one is even acknowledging the obvious argument against this war, which is that it's all sold off lies and completely unnecessary. The justification, in part, for this war, given it's incoherent, so we actually don't know the real justification. But one of these selling points, supposedly, we've heard this from J.D. Vance, we've heard this from Marco Rubio, from Trump himself, from Steve Witkoff, and from the shills in the media. We've heard that Iran is an imminent threat. This is why they believe they can circumvent the Constitution and go around any constitutional proceedings or procedures for declaring a war. They believe there is an imminent threat, so the president can act. Well, given that there's an imminent threat, you do have to outline what that threat is. The imminence of this threat needs to be outlined. It needs to be described to the American people so that we understand why this was an essential, necessary war that we had to go fight. Because it should be pretty easy to do if it's so imminent. You should be able to show us like they were about to attack or they are capable of attacking. But not only are they not doing any of that, they're ignoring the obvious fact that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. They had not started rebuilding their nuclear facilities since June, when we bombed them in the 12-day war and destroyed them. They had not shown any significant process of rebuilding. They had not begun that process. That's according to intelligence assessments reported in Wall Street Journal, Dropsite News. There's just no evidence. Satellite footage shows that there's been no rebuilding of these facilities. That's just not true. We have people lying about it, though, citing no evidence. We have people saying, like Mark Levin on Fox News, that they have nuclear-tipped ICBMs pointed at American cities, completely leaving out the fact that they don't have ICBMs. They don't have nuclear tips for those ICBMs that they don't have. And there's nothing, they're not pointed at American cities, because why? They don't have them. So what is this? It's this fantasy land of this justification that we had an imminent threat from Iran. They had ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles that were aimed at America, when the truth is, they don't even have ICBMs. Again, the intelligence assessments reported in Israeli media, Jerusalem Post, said they would probably take, at the best, with help from China and North Korea, 8 years to develop ICBMs. And most likely, if they were working alone, it would be 10 or more years to develop ICBMs. There was no imminence to this threat. There was plenty of time, if you wanted this war, to go to Congress and get an authorization the constitutional way, which suddenly all the constitutional conservatives like Ted Cruz or any of these guys aren't for. Funny how that works. Funny how we can ignore this document when it's convenient. And they're just able to completely circumvent any debate with the American public. At least with Iraq, George Bush felt the need to fake it. At least they had this fake debate between the two parties. And then we got everyone on record. We got Hillary Clinton on record supporting the war. At least we had that. But we can't even say that with this war because there was no process by which this war was declared. It was done with a tweet in the early hours of the morning. It's so insane. It's beyond parody. And this is where we'll talk about how we actually got here, because that is important to understand. Because, again, as I said earlier, people who don't pay attention to the news, don't pay attention to the military movements in the Middle East, as most people in this country do not because they have other things to do. They aren't all political nerds like me and the people watching this show. They would have no idea that this was even going to happen. They, of course, would not know of this supposedly imminent threat from Iran because they hadn't been told it. It was not a cultural moment like Iraq was. And there is just, this is completely out of the blue because many of them couldn't even find Iran on a map. Probably 90% of the country couldn't, if we're being honest. And they don't even know who the Ayatollah Khamenei is. So they don't understand the beef here. Let me explain it to you. Since the 90s, Israel, specifically the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu, have worked in collaboration with Americans in the Israel lobby of the United States and Americans in our government, our foreign policy class, the establishment, the war machine. These two groups, the Americans that are working on behalf of Israel and the Israelis, have worked in collaboration. They've conspired over decades, since the 90s, to systematically overthrow all of the regimes in the Middle East with American money and American lives and American weapons so that Israel can achieve regional dominance. This has been the strategy since the 90s. One of the earliest signs of this was in 1996, the Clean Break Memo written by Douglas Feith, Richard Pearl, and David Wurmser, three members of the foreign policy establishment, written to Benjamin Netanyahu, who was the new prime minister of Israel in 1996, outlining the plan for how America and Israel can overthrow Iraq, can overthrow Syria, and then end off with Iran. And they would do this to help Israel secure the realm, as they said, and can lock down regional hegemony so that Israel can expand its borders, which is known as Greater Israel, this plan that they have, to expand their borders into Gaza and the West Bank, which we've seen them try to do since October 7th, and into southern Lebanon, where they would like to occupy, and into Syria, parts of Syria. This has been the plan for decades, and those people I just named, Douglas Feith, David Wurmser, and Richard Pearl, the people who wrote the Clean Break Memo to Benjamin Netanyahu, outlining this plan, would go on to work in key positions in the foreign policy wing of the Bush administration and were key decision makers leading us to war in Iraq. These were the people, David Wurmser, who ran the Office of Special Plans. This was the office in the Defense Department that collected intelligence on Iraq, that got the WMD lie to George Bush's desk, to Dick Cheney, that convinced Bush to launch this war. Where did that lie come from? Where did this intelligence that was utterly fabricated come from? You would never guess. It came from the Israelis. Benjamin Netanyahu testified in Congress on behalf of the people of Israel that supported this war, and on behalf of, as a Middle East expert, regional expert, he said that we would be greeted as liberators and democracy would sweep the region. He cynically made this claim, knowing it wasn't true, because the goal has always been, in every one of these conflicts, chaos in the region, failed states, so that Israel would not have a regional threat, because Israel wants to achieve its regional goals using American lives and American tax dollars and American weapons. We also saw a similar operation in Syria in the early 2010s when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton worked with the Israelis on behalf of the Israel lobby in America, and behalf of Israel, worked with the Israelis and with the Saudis in Syria to try and overthrow Bashar al-Assad by funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the enemies of the United States. They funded, armed, and trained Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. Al-Qaeda, of course, being the people that knocked down the Twin Towers. Okay? Barack Obama, because it benefited Israel, the U.S. foreign policy class, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, funded and trained and armed Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad on behalf of Israel. Because, as the Israelis say, Iran, Syria, and Lebanon make up what they call the Shiite Crescent in the Middle East, which is the funneling of arms from Iran through Syria, which Assad was letting happen, to Hezbollah, the group in southern Lebanon that's fighting Israel. And because it was a threat to Israel to keep this crescent, the Shiite crescent, intact, America had to go and fund our arch enemy, Al-Qaeda, in Syria to overthrow the regime that was unfriendly towards Israel. Okay? This is how we've been prioritizing a foreign nation over our own, by funding our enemies, by funding people with American blood on their hands. And we saw this again in Libya as well, where we overthrew Muammar Gaddafi on behalf of Israel. Again, look this up. Do some research on this. On behalf of Israel, using Obama-backed and NATO-backed insurgency groups and rebel groups, who were also former Al-Qaeda affiliates, would go on to be ISIS affiliates, in Libya, to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi and create a failed state, which is Libya now. So this is what we've seen systematically occur in the region over the course of the past 30 years. And all of it has been done on behalf of Israel. Then what happened? So in 2016, we then see the rise of Donald Trump, who rises in large part really, on a message of no wars, ending the wars, because we all acknowledged that the Iraq War was a mistake. All of the Trump supporters, I should say, the Republican establishment had not yet acknowledged that the Iraq War was a mistake, and that the country had bankrupted itself in these Middle East wars. We had forgotten the people of this country on behalf of foreign and domestic lobbying groups who wanted to see these wars continue. So Trump rose to power in part on this message of ending the wars, getting our troops home, prioritizing this country first. Some would call it America first. This was the message. And we now see this was a similar message in 2024. But what happened in 2024? Miriam Adelson, the largest single donor from the Israel lobby in America, gave Donald Trump $100 million in the 2024 election. And she didn't do that for no reason. You think you just give $100 million to a political candidate for no reason? Of course you want something in return. And what have we seen? We've seen throughout this entire term, this administration working for Israel. That's it. That's like what they are doing. We saw it with the bombing of Iran in the 12-day war over the nuclear facilities, which Tulsi Gabbard herself back in March of 2025 said we're not making progress towards enriching to a nuclear grade. And all of us who were paying attention to all the history I've just laid out acknowledged back at the time that this was part of a broader regime change effort in Iran. And when Trump ended that war, back at the end of the 12-day war, when we got a ceasefire, everyone was saying people like us who knew the longer history here were crazy, were panicking for saying that regime change was the end goal here. But we all said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And now all of us have been saying this whole time. And what did we just see happen this weekend? We saw what we were told was over. We were told the nuclear situation with Iran was over. We were told we obliterated their facilities. The White House website still says that. Yet, what happened? We were told this time that that's a justification for this war. J.D. Vance said we've seen them trying to rebuild their nuclear facilities when there's no evidence of that at all. There's no the satellite footage shows that. There's no evidence of it. Marco Rubio said the same thing. Steve Witkoff said the same thing. All without evidence. So this whole time, the entire discussion of Iran has been centered around regime change. The Israelis say this openly. They don't lie as much about their intentions here, it seems, in this situation, because they've been saying for decades that regime change is their end goal, and they're saying it now. And now, for the first time really officially on record, the U.S. president has said regime change is also the goal for the United States. And it was all done on behalf of Israel. Now, we're going to end off here by just showing a couple clips of each of these figures that I've listed out here. J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard. Here are some clips of them over the years speaking out against regime change. We'll start off here with Donald Trump. This is a montage that was set up here by, let's just see who made this montage, Patriot Takes. I want to give credit where it's due. This is a montage of Donald Trump speaking out against regime change and war in Iran. Take a look.
These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas. In addition, there must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that is perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad,
We should have never gone into the Middle East. We should have never gone into the Middle East. Under my leadership, we will turn the page forever on those foolish, stupid days of never-ending wars.
We're rebuilding our military stronger than ever before, and we are not going to deplete it again on stupid, senseless, endless wars.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists and the deep state. I am the president who delivers peace. I was the first president in decades who didn't start a war. And the worst, most incompetent, most corrupt president in history is going to drag us into World War III. And this horrible, horrible president is dragging us toward World War III. We're going to be in World War III soon. Because I think we would have been good with Iran. I don't want to do anything bad to Iran. Large sections of the Middle East. I mean, look at the death and destruction that's taken place. And none of this would have happened if I were president. Our opponents join with warmongers and neocons to wage endless wars, these wars that never end.
I don't want to do anything bad with Iran. I don't want to get into any more wars. We're going to end the wars. We're going to purge all the neocons. Purge all the neocons. Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State. Mike Waltz was National Security Advisor until it was discovered he was collaborating secretly and conspiring with Benjamin Netanyahu to try and get Trump into war with Iran back in the spring. Can't purge all the neocons. The neocons were put into the big positions in this administration. It's just so betrayal is not a strong enough word. Here is Trump back in 2016, this classic clip that is still a legendary clip of him trashing Jeb Bush completely correctly on the Iraq war. Take a look.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor.
Now, somebody who's been suspiciously silent on all of this is J.D. Vance, our supposedly anti-war vice president, the man who's skeptical of foreign interventions, who made his name in the Senate trying to get war powers resolutions on different wars that Joe Biden was involved in, trying to cut off funding from Ukraine. Made his name on this. J.D. Vance, here's J.D. Vance on Tim Dillon's show back in October of 2024, saying that that it's not in America's interest to go to war with Iran. It's just too much to even handle. Take a look.
Yeah. But America's interest is sometimes going to be distinct. Like sometimes we're going to have overlapping interests, and sometimes we're going to have distinct interests. And our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran. Right. It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country.
Now, someone else who made her name on being anti-war is Tulsi Gabbard. Her entire purpose, her reason for leaving the Democratic Party, which she ran for president with in 2020, her reason for leaving the party was because they became the war party. She said this. This isn't a secret. This isn't me making that up. Her reason for leaving the party was because they had become the war party. She joined the Trump campaign in 2024 because she thought he was going to be the anti-war guy. Now, here is Tulsi Gabbard back in a debate in 2020, specifically talking about Iran. She sold "No War with Iran" t-shirts in 2020. Here's her on the debate stage making this case. Take a look.
Let's deal with the situation where we are, where this president and his chicken hawk cabinet have led us to the brink of war with Iran. I served in the war in Iraq at the height of the war in 2005, a war that took over 4,000 of my brothers and sisters in uniforms' lives. The American people need to understand that this war with Iran would be far more devastating, far more costly than anything that we ever saw in Iraq. It would take many more lives. It would exacerbate the refugee crisis. And it wouldn't be just contained within Iran. This would turn into a regional war. This is why it's so important that every one of us, every single American, stand up and say, no war with Iran.
Here's Tulsi Gabbard on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News back in the day. Here is her making the case again about Iran. Take a look.
How does a war with Iran serve the best interests of the American people in the United States? A war that would undermine our national security, and it would strengthen terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It would carry a heavy human cost, and it would cost us taxpayers trillions of dollars. Forget about investing in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Forget about having the resources that we need for things like healthcare, education, affordable housing. We wouldn't have those resources because this would go towards yet another extremely devastating, costly war with Iran.
The fact that she has not resigned, the fact that she didn't resign after the president basically trashed her during the 12-day war and said that her reporting and her intelligence was false. How do you not resign after that? Does she have no self-respect? Does she ever believe what she said? How is she not resigned after her entire career was built on being against a war with Iran, being against war in general? She was one of the most outspoken people against the war in Ukraine. How can you not resign when you join this administration and join the campaign back in 24 on the exact reason of foreign policy non-interventionism? I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's such a disgrace. J.D. Vance has basically lost 2028 at this point, I think. Who knows? Obviously, who knows? But J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, these Iran war candidates that they're going to have to run on in 2028, it's good luck. Good luck, guys. Good luck, Republican Party, in 2026. They're going to get blown out, as they should. They deserve it. They've broken every single promise. As Israel has gotten everything they've ever wanted in the Middle East, regime change in Iran, the regime in Syria fell. As Trump said it the other day, he basically propped up Al-Qaeda, Jolani, in Syria. As Israel gets everything they want, they're annexing the West Bank with impunity. No one's even going to say anything about it. They've slaughtered probably like 100,000 people in Gaza. As they get everything they want, the Israelis have gotten everything they want. And as that has happened, Americans get no mass deportations, no deep state arrests, no COVID justice. Where is Fauci's arrest exactly? Can we get that, please? The man who locked us all in our house for a year and a half, 2 years. Can we arrest this man? Can we try and do something? Trump hasn't even taken up Rand Paul's efforts to try and get Fauci arrested. No deep state arrests. No purging of the swamp. The Doge cuts got all reversed in the big, beautiful bill. And now, here we are. The No New Wars campaign resulted in a war in Iran. The worst nightmare of all the anti-war people who supported the Trump administration in 2024. So, betrayal, again, is not strong enough of a word in this circumstance. So, that's where we'll end it off for today. Of course, stay tuned here, subscribe and like down below for more updates on all of this. We're going to be covering this as it unfolds because this is the most important story going on right now. That potential regime change war in Iran, I shouldn't even say potential, a regime change war in Iran that could result in years of chaos in the region. That is the biggest story. So we'll be covering it here frequently as it develops here. So please be sure to go down below, like and subscribe. Go follow me on Instagram, X, and Spotify, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good one.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.